I will not sugarcoat it. We are in danger. And President Trump, who I tend not to cover as much as everyone else does, because what do I have to add that's not being reported and bloviated about 25,000 times today about Trump and the porn stars he's had affairs with and his tweets and all that? I leave it to others in the corporate media and some in the independent media to bloviate about Trump. And I try to cover the disappearing middle class and things like environmental genocide, water contamination, police brutality, state and local corruption, and all those things. However, John Bolton is now the United States National Security Advisor to our president. President Donald Trump has replaced H.R. McMaster, who resigned. He was really fired. He was probably just given the opportunity to resign. But McMaster was rumored for many weeks now to being fired, because Trump is basically purging most of his cabinet, actually. John Bolton is replacing him. And I did a video on John Bolton before. And John Bolton, honestly, makes Hillary Clinton and John McCain look semi-dovish. John Bolton is the largest warmonger, the greatest, the most intense warmonger this modern day country has ever seen. John Bolton has proposed multi-pronged wars with Iran, with North Korea, with Syria, where his proposals would include ground troops from the United States across multiple countries. John Bolton was one of the preeminent cheerleaders while in the Bush administration for the Iraq War, which, although it wasn't covered in corporate media that much, the 15th anniversary was the other day. John Bolton is going to be counseling President Trump on what to do in reference to North Korea, which, as we know, Trump has been beating his chest against North Korea now for almost a year. So this is beyond dangerous. I think the term World War III is launched, bad word, is used way too flippantly and easily, but we are on the brink of World War III if John Bolton is the first person in President Trump's ear as far as potential conflict with North Korea. And make no mistake about it, even though the media has been making Russia out to be our greatest threat and, reenacting the Cold War right in front of your TV stands and in the pages of the New York Times and the Washington Post, North Korea is a much, much greater threat to the United States than Russia is. North Korea is led by I think Kim Jong-un is in his early to mid-30s. He is known as, you could say what you want about Vladimir Putin. He has murdered journalists. He has done a lot of terrible things. He's a smart guy. He doesn't just impulsively do things. Kim Jong-un is a lunatic. He's a lunatic. And now you have a different kind of lunatic in John Bolton counseling the lunatic in the White House. I mean, frankly, if you could afford it, I would build a bunker. And I'm not kidding around, folks. I'm going to play you a clip showing you John Bolton 1 year ago on North Korea. Here we go, folks.
Institute here in New York. Ambassador, he's belligerent, brazen, defiant, and Kim Jong-un shows no signs of backing down. And there are fears that he could be practicing a possible first strike on the U.S. What do we do?
Well, and I'd add irrational to that. Even though this test appears to have failed, you know, U.S. rocket scientists in the 1950s used to say when our Vanguards and Jupiter Cs were blowing up on the launch pads that they were 90% successes because they learned from their failures. There's no doubt that North Korea, particularly over the last 8 years, has made a lot of progress in getting to its objective of deliverable nuclear weapons. And we've had American and South Korean military officials say that their ability to do that could occur very, very soon. In fact, some people have estimated next year. So we're running out of time here. The administration is reviewing its options. Some have talked about imposing new sanctions. I'm certainly all in favor of that. The Bush administration never should have lifted the sanctions. But I don't think that's nearly enough. I think this risk is palpable. And I think the only long-term solution, which is reunification, we may be running out of time on. We don't appear to be raising it with China, which has unique leverage over the North. So I'm extremely worried. I'm worried not just about North Korea, I'm worried about Iran, too. How long would it take for Iran to get a deliverable nuclear weapon? Roughly 1 day after North Korea gets it.
Yeah, they're apparently working together. You mentioned the administration of Rex Tillerson's meeting in Beijing. Do you think the Chinese...
So, there you have it, folks. I mean, you really can't stress this enough. He says we should never lift the sanctions. He says we're running out of time. He wrongly says that North Korea is on the brink, is on the brink. They got the weapons. And he is essentially, not explicitly, but essentially saying we need to act now. And this is the kind of talk you've heard from neocons dating back to the Iraq War, during the Cold War. They always overestimate and sell you on Iraq or Iran or North Korea or all these places are, 2 months away from having the technology and the material to launch a nuclear attack that could reach California or Hawaii or the East Coast. They never actually provide the evidence of how close these foreign, because I do think if there is an imminent attack, I think we forgot what imminent attack means. If we have evidence of an imminent attack, then of course a country has to defend itself. Congress is the one that's supposed to vote on that, not the president, just unilaterally deciding. But John Bolton is essentially saying we're running out of time, and he is calling for us to act. So you have in one breath Trump saying, I'll meet with Kim Jong-un, and we need to talk about denuclearization. But John Bolton has often said negotiation is a waste of time with North Korea. So Trump, it seems, even though he's bombed Syria, he's increased drone airstrikes. I mean, you think Obama was droning a lot? Look at the Trump. But Trump in one breath says, I don't want, on the campaign trail, I don't want to spread our democracy around the world. I want to focus on nation building here in America, which is very popular in Wisconsin, Michigan, Ohio, Illinois, Pennsylvania. He obviously hasn't followed through on that. But at this point, he hasn't launched a full-fledged war. But the chances of him launching a full-fledged war have just gotten a lot greater. And I do not say that to fearmonger or without carefully thinking about it. The chances of us sending ground troops into North Korea, South Korea, Iran, Russia, Syria, just went from to very likely. Very likely. Let me read you John Bolton on the Iraq War. I still think the decision to overthrow Saddam was correct. I think decisions made after that decision were wrong, although I think the worst decision made after that was the 2011 decision to withdraw U.S. and coalition forces. The people who say, oh, things would have been much better if you didn't overthrow Saddam, miss the point that today's Middle East does not flow totally and unchangeably from the decision to overthrow Saddam alone. Well, I don't even know where to start with that stupidity, with that flawed thinking. Number one, the decision to, quote, overthrow Saddam, who was a terrible, terrible dictator, the decision to overthrow Saddam has destabilized and caused chaos throughout the Middle East. The decision to overthrow Saddam created ISIS. Because when you bomb countries that had nothing to do with 9/11, when you kill or wound 100,000 civilians, typically people don't like that. Now, I'm not defending ISIS at all. There's no defense of terrorism. Killing innocent civilians, there is no defense. When the United States does it around the world and calls it collateral damage, there is no defense for that. When it's done to us, there is no defense for that. These are psychopaths who perpetuate terrorism. But while addressing that, we must also address, why do they hate the United States? And share this video. Let's get it to more people. Why do they hate the United States? Because people like John Bolton and Bill Kristol, who has been rehabilitated on MSNBC, and hold on, let me plug in my computer here. And Bill Kristol and David Frum and the journalists at the New York Times have led us into these wars, have led us in to basically destroying other countries. Iraq is not better off than it was. And by the way, the United States is not better off than it was. I hate to say it, because nearly 4,000 American soldiers died. On Tuesday was the 15th anniversary of Iraq. It barely got any news coverage in the United States. But the bottom line is this, folks. This man is saying, no, it was fine. No problem with Iraq. No problem with Iraq. This man is now, he says that the problem was leaving. He also said we should never leave Afghanistan, which, by the way, there's very few Al-Qaeda left in Afghanistan, yet we're still there. Because we don't actually go to war to defeat an enemy that attacked us. We go to wars to take over other countries, take over their oil. Yeah, we topple dictators, but then we basically allow or help prop up other brutal dictators. And it's been going on since 1940s, 50s. Oliver Stone's documentary on Netflix can teach you all about it. The Untold History of the United States. John Bolton was also a proponent of Libya and taking out Gaddafi there. Well, Libya is a chaotic mess as we speak. John Bolton thinks we should take out Assad. Well, if you haven't noticed, and Kyle Kalinske does great reporting on this, and others have done great work on this, a lot of the rebels fighting Assad in Syria are a mix of Al-Qaeda and other terrorist networks. So the grass isn't always greener on the other side, folks. And people like John Bolton, who want to huff and puff constantly about the threat from North Korea and Iran and Russia and Syria, he don't give a damn about the threat of not investing in our schools and not investing in our infrastructure and not investing in our water infrastructure, which is poisoned all around the country, and not investing in government jobs programs. He does not care about how the income inequality has basically destroyed half the 3/4 of the country. He cares about making sure America is strong around the world, not strong here. And he now has the ear of our president. He cheerleaded for Iraq. Even a lot of neocons have now admitted Iraq was a mistake. Not John Bolton. He thinks we should be in Iraq still. He thinks we should be in Afghanistan still. He has talked about boots on the grounds in Syria. And Trump operates through his gut, but John Bolton does too. And John Bolton's gut, which will be giving the advice to our president who has his finger on the button, John Bolton's gut is based on, he looks at lives and those we kill around the world as numbers on a balance sheet. He also doesn't care about how these wars and endless interventionism is destroying the United States middle class, as I talked about. Do you know Iraq and Afghanistan, the estimates are that it costs us between $6 and $7 trillion. Do you know how much money that is? We could have pretty much ended poverty in the country, educated most of the country, provided a healthcare system. John Bolton is not only a Cold War thinker, but he's a World War II era thinker. And he is now National Security Advisor. If I were you, I would call your congressperson or senator and tell them John Bolton cannot be Donald Trump's National Security Advisor. And some of you won't like this, but I'm going to keep it real. If John Bolton was the Republican nomination against Hillary Clinton, and it wasn't Donald Trump, it was John Bolton against Hillary Clinton, I would have voted for Hillary Clinton. I would have had to drink a lot of whiskey before I went and did it, but I would have voted for her, because this is how dangerous this man is. She's very dangerous too, but his track record is that of someone who literally wants to stretch the United States into 3 or 4 wars simultaneously. Hillary Clinton's bad, but she has some semblance of sanity. John Bolton doesn't. John Bolton is a danger to our country. The last thing I will say, oh, is Bolton worse than Crystal or Cheney? Oh my God. That's like asking me, do you want to be shot in the face or the nuts? That literally is like asking a man, would you rather be shot in the forehead or your manly parts? If my family was on the line and I had to answer the right way, you put a gun to my head, is Bolton worse than Dick Cheney? Flip a coin.